Today's topic is going to be, and actually, you posed this question, but it's funny. We both saw a post where it was a question, and then we're like, well, we're just going to ask the fucking question and see what happens. So Josh got to it before I got here, and we were looking at some of like the responses and stuff and talking about the fact that why is it a topic? So today's topic is about bringing an escort with you when you go to a shoot. And I still don't remember who made the post, but I feel like we saw the same one.
Oh, yeah, it had to be. There was like a yellow graphic.
Yeah.
I don't even know. But thank you for posting it to get this started. I appreciate it.
If I go back and research, I'll put who it was down below. But somebody that we both follow ended up, posting something that we both saw. So Josh posted in the DMV photography group, and for anybody who's new to listening, on Facebook, I run a group called the DMV Photography Group for models and photographers. I still got it wrong.
Sure.
It's the fourth time I've said it today.
That group.
That group.
Yes.
There's a link somewhere, I promise. Somewhere down there. All right. So Josh's post. God, how was that 9 hours ago?
I don't know. It feels like an eternity.
It's been a long day. All right. And that's something that people don't talk about a lot is how much of the behind the scenes stuff takes so much time. And even though we have spent hours with each other today, there's still hours of editing.
Oh, yeah.
And nobody sees that stuff. And then it's like, once you realize it's there, a lot of people stop because they either A, don't want to learn the editing, or B, they realize how much time they're spending and they're never sure if they're going to get anything from that time.
Which I think actually goes to a whole other episode of, there was a post a while back about, for every hour I shoot, there's 9 hours of behind the scenes.
Oh, I remember that.
I completely and totally contradict that.
For that.
I think that would be something to maybe put to the group and get a discussion about and see
what the feedback is off that. Yeah, I like that. I also want to do a poll too about what everybody wants this year, because I really need to put like either workshop or event or several. I almost want to do a meet and greet.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool.
You know what I mean? Just like a mixer kind of deal, almost like speed dating. Just run through kind of everybody and just kind of meet everybody, shake everybody's hand, hear what they do. I think we need to poll that. I think we need to see where the interest is, because I have a feeling it's either going to be workshops or events. But I don't know about you. I don't see people do meetups, but the meetups are about photography. So you've got models and photographers in the same space, but nobody's really having a conversation because they're trying to get content in while they're there. I like it. Back to topic, because that's the hard part for me. I don't know why anybody watches anything that I do. This is horrible. So Josh's post is, models tell me all the time about photographers not allowing escorts, which sends off red flags. I love the fact that you put the symbol in for the red flag.
Of course.
I tell new models to say you are bringing a boyfriend just to gauge a photographer's reaction. Why can't they be there? What are you thinking is going to happen other than photos? And oh God, you and I both have so many like secondhand experiences from people giving us stories about what happened. And I mean, even the comments on this are still really good. It looks like Leanne's was pretty thorough. Amina's on here too. I'd like to read what hers says, but we'll go through a couple of them. But do you want to start off with whatever it was that kind of your thought process on the whole escort situation?
So again, there's a lot of stories of, boyfriends or mothers or whatever who cause chaos during a shoot. They want to give their 2 cents while you're shooting. They want to, they take the attention away from the actual shoot itself and make it more about them and the girlfriend, whatever. But I have really never had those terrible experiences. I have learned to navigate through them. And actually, Wes and I had a conversation about that we can touch on in a little bit.
Okay.
It's all about making the model feel the most comfortable that she can be. And if that involves bringing her whole family and having them scattered around the studio, so be it. The one thing that I feel that is the red flag is when a photographer says that a model is not allowed to bring an escort or not allowed to bring a male escort. What are their intentions outside of photography?
Yeah, Anastasia actually brought that up in her comment.
That a male person should not be in the same room. I've seen people say that, oh, I don't want them to I don't want to teach for free. I don't want to give away my trade secrets. Bro, you learned it on YouTube just like everyone else. Just let's calm it down just a little bit. It'll be
Well,
okay.
but there's a saying that everything's already been done.
Correct.
Now, that's only about 90% accurate because people are intelligent enough that they're going to come up with something moderately new that's going to be eye-catching or whatever. But most of the stuff has been done, and a lot of inspiration comes from what's already out in the ether, what you've already seen, art galleries, whatever it is, even if it's just online. So unless there's something very, very specific, that's never really a thing. You know what I mean? And there's so much free information out there now than what we had when we were doing film, because you and I both did film. And I think that because the security issue is always there, and I don't know if I've ever said it on this particular platform, but in random conversation, one of the things I say to a lot of people when I talk about being a female photographer, especially working with people, because you're going to get people who are going to reach out to you to shoot with you. But being a female photographer, I'm way more leery when men reach out to me to be shot than I am when a female reaches out. And that vetting process, if it's a female I don't know, I look for who they've worked with. And then I might want to do a video chat with them before I actually work with them, because then
Exactly.
I know I'm talking to the model
Mm-hmm.
and not a reproduction
Mm-hmm.
of, their account. But women are never safe anywhere. And you guys can come at me in the comments if you really want me to, but that is what life has taught me, is that if I am not confident and secure in everything that I go into, then looks like a vulnerability in whatever situation that I'm in. And even in my own home, I have cameras everywhere. Every door has a camera. My interior has a camera. Like, it's one of those things where it's just like you never really fully feel safe ever. And there was something I came across about a year ago, and it was talking about, and I'm not going to say this verbatim because I'm only remembering a portion of it. You could be in an elevator situation. There could be one guy on the elevator and one female waiting to get on the elevator. And because the female does not want to make the male feel like they're uncomfortable with the male, they will still get into the cage. And that was how it was referred to, because you're getting into a box and you have however many levels to go, and there's no clue what's going to happen in that time frame on the way, even if the person made you uncomfortable. And we do that because some of that's what's been ingrained is don't make them upset, don't make them uncomfortable, whatever, as opposed to just not getting on the elevator.
Mm-hmm.
But the not getting on the elevator makes the person feel like something just happened, and then they're worried about the fact that they're going to make that person feel some kind of way. And I think there's a truth in it. I don't know how overly accurate it is, but there's a truth in that. How many situations are we in where we don't speak up because there's a fear of safety?
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens very often with a lot of the models that run into issues, is there's a fear of safety in the situation, but they weren't necessarily prepared for the safety issue because it wasn't really something that should be an issue to begin with, because it's supposed to be a professional environment.
Supposed to be a professional.
Supposed to be. All right, which comment do you want to start with first? Do we want to go to Leanne?
Yeah, there's some really good comments. So he made a really good comment. I'm not even going to try to butcher his name.
Let
But
me get there. Go ahead.
and he talks about a lot of things, but the one thing he says that if you trust your photographer, then that person, then they can stay home.
Right.
And again, I went through, and you guys can read all the read, because I commented on everyone's post.
Sure.
And I will continue to do so. But I said there are too many people out there claiming to be photographers who are charismatic and charming. He goes, but you know who else had those same traits? Ted Bundy.
Yep.
Just because you have a conversation with a guy, just like you said about vetting, doing a call ahead of time, but just because you meet somebody through the internet and have a conversation, and this is even the worst thing, someone did not have a bad experience, doesn't mean
That's really common.
that you will not have that same experience. And I think for safety all around, it should be, just play it smart. And there was a comment that said that they knew photographers who had weapons pulled on them and had things stolen. Again, vetting, like, know who you're bringing in. So, like, I don't know, it's just, in a professional atmosphere, that should not be an issue either. But then again,
It's tough to manage because it depends on, there's a lot of factors to showing up to things. So the reason I do the events as much as I do is there's a lot of people.
Yes.
So when you have that group environment and that group mentality, a lot of times people have a tendency to be on their best behavior. And even though you make a point of contact, you may never talk to that person again. You might see them online and then they decide they're never doing it again. And then you don't see them online anymore. Or, they do something stupid, lose their account, it gets hacked, whatever. But the group environment is nice to get a sense or feel of somebody, but it does not mean you're not going to have a bad experience with them later, because then you go to that one-on-one situation might be completely different. I had one of the models that I worked with, she reached out to me after she had a conversation online. She had booked with a photographer. They were using a hotel room, which is really, really common for shooting with people you've never worked with. And she mentioned the fact that her boyfriend was coming with her, and the photographer lost his shit. And I said, sweetheart, I said, you dodged a bullet. No, you're not overthinking it. There should be no reason you couldn't bring your boyfriend or anyone with you for that matter. And that was Anastasia's point, was that she had a photographer talk to her about she could bring a female escort, but not a male escort. Now, his reasoning behind that was because, he didn't want somebody on his property or something. It was something along those lines. Didn't want somebody
Didn't want a strange man on his property.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, from the events that I've co-hosted and stuff with, one of my favorite people, Jim, he has let us use his property before for some of these events. And one of the last events we did was really large. And he goes, I don't think I want to do that again. He said there were a lot of people walking through my home. There were a lot of people moving stuff because there was stuff in the way. He's like, I didn't know who was here. Yeah. Even though you guys were receiving them in, he's like, I did not know who was here. He's like, I don't know that I want to do that again. I'm like, you know what? That's fair. And I think what happens is people are always trying to mitigate cost. So they might shoot from home. I technically could shoot from home, and I have done it, but I don't do it often because I don't want people in and out of my home either, because you never know who you're inviting in.
Exactly.
And like for you, your studio is separate from home. Even though you have everything here, it's still very separate. It's a separate space. You have your own measures in place for how you monitor and manage. And I think that's the important part, is you have to decide how you're going to move through and what are your safety protocols, because you still should have safety protocols. Even as a model, you should be prepared for as much as you can possibly be prepared for. I think the other thing, and this just goes back to some of the etiquettes, some of the models have been in positions where there were no red flags when they went. And then they started getting into shooting. Things started to get uncomfortable, whether it was words, whether it was actions, whatever it was. Well, they didn't get a deposit. So they didn't even get a portion of the money up front before they met this person. And they didn't want to say anything until the shoot was done because they wanted to get the other part of the money. And they also didn't want to put themselves in a situation where they might be harmed because they said something that upset the person that was making them uncomfortable. And I think that happens more often than we hear about, is that discomfort and confrontation is a lot of times why some of these photographers get away with what they get away with, is because in that moment, you don't want to put yourself as a target. And then you're still afraid to be a target later. Let's see, what else we got here? It's in here real quick.
I mean, pretty much everyone almost had the same response. Both sides. I mean, there was one here that I do want to see. I'm not seeing any comments about fathers being an escort.
Mm-hmm.
Those are really the only ones I don't allow, except for a few photographers, if you can tell them that. I've had really bad experiences when they bring fathers. That's why fathers, and those are always extremes, would be a red flag for a model as a photographer. If it was always a red flag for me if they wanted to bring their father.
Okay.
But I guess that also goes back to,
what are you shooting?
Yeah, what are you shooting? How long has that model been in the industry that they should know? In my opinion, a partner, your parents, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
should know what you're getting into.
Absolutely. It shouldn't be a surprise.
Yeah, Lee made a comment that she used to bring a friend, but not a partner, because she didn't want to have to explain the process, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about this as, okay, so you go do an art nude shoot.
Okay.
You come home and you're proud of that work and you show your partner. but you haven't explained to them what you do or the process,
Right.
then is that an argument after the fact?
Well, so I think that somewhat lends. We were talking before the camera was rolling about like, even you and I dating. I've been single for years, and one of the things that I know I always have to factor in is one, I have a public life, and I'm very upfront about the fact that I have a public life. There's a lot that goes on social media. Not everything goes on social media, but there's a lot that goes on social media. And with that being said, you have to have somebody either A, they're comfortable with it in the sense that they're going to participate, or they're comfortable being private and not really existing in your social media. Those are like your two options.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand the discomfort in having the conversation from the model side, especially if, there's nudity or fetish, the kink world, that sort of thing. But it's better to have that conversation up front and prepare them
Yes.
versus trying to get to know them and then not filling them in till later, because then you're just potentially going to ruin whatever you attempted to build anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely shouldn't be a conversation on the back end. It should be something that's conversational.
Exactly. Yes.
Because not everybody's comfortable with it.
No.
Not everybody's we talked about this before we started. I am so desensitized to nudity. I don't even have a requirement for nudity, but I shoot it often because I'm a female photographer. And females are more comfortable with female photographers a lot of times because I'm not making anybody uncomfortable.
Exactly.
You do whatever you want to do. I'm just going to try to make it look pretty on my side. And I'm kind of to a point where it's just like, after you've seen enough naked bodies, they're just naked bodies,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think unless you go through the experience, you can really you really understand it, really absorb the fact that that's a reality to what we end up doing a lot of times. I was going somewhere else with that and I lost my train of thought again.
Well, you think about that.
Okay, you
Yeah.
do things over there.
So Wesley and I had a back and forth, and he said that he has no problem with people coming, but he doesn't want them to turn into the creative director.
I've had that happen.
Yeah, without being asked to direct the process.
Yeah.
He was like, I would have a problem with this because of interfering with my creative process. I thought they were escort only. Again, I've never placed restrictions on who accompanies a model. Just mind your business and allow me to create magic. And I 100% agree.
Comes back to etiquette.
And I've said that this is definitely more of an issue with the reasons that I've heard from models telling the photographers why they can't bring someone. I said, I have a very sarcastic, smart-ass response to that, which again is kind of my default.
Yeah.
And I say, oh, how long have you been shooting? What kind of camera do you use? Would you suggest Rembrandt lighting or the golden ratio? And that just normally shuts them up. Baffle them with brilliance, or dazzle them with brilliance, or baffle them with bullshit. So normally they do sit down. So,
right.
but you kind of have to establish this is my house. I'm in control. But I've had boyfriends who have given, hey, well, what do you think about this? Sure, I'll try your thing, especially if it's an appeasement to make them comfortable. I had a boyfriend come one time who by his appearance, and I definitely judged that book by the cover.
Okay.
He was not going to be up for what me and the model had discussed previously. She sent me pictures of the wardrobe that she was going to bring, and I was like, this is going to go crazy. He walked her from the shooting area to the dressing room, would kiss her, tell her he loved her, and then wait for her outside of the dressing room door to come back and shoot. And I was like, oh, this is going to be way too much.
Okay.
But she was a little bit nervous about shooting the things that she had brought.
Okay.
And he was like, babe, you're so hot. Let's go put that on. You look so good. And he hyped her up.
Okay.
And it got to the point where him and I had more fun talking and everything while she was in the dressing room. And then we became friends, which then put her at ease even more. And we just shot and shot it. It was a good time. So you never really know where it's going to go. Or like a couple people had talked about, bringing escorts, especially for outdoor shoots, and holding a reflector. Holding a light stand, put them to work.
Sure.
I mean, I think Bob Barford even said that he's had people help clean up after a messy shoot.
Yeah.
Definitely, just put them to work, make them feel valued, and more than likely they will not interfere.
Yeah. Well, and I think that comes back to etiquette and communication as well too. One of the drawbacks I think sometimes, especially when you do the collaborative stuff, and this is a little separate from this, but it kind of feeds into it. I don't work for you when we collaborate.
Exactly.
We work together, but I don't work for you. And sometimes I think what ends up happening, and especially for the models, especially if they're working for or working with people in TFP that are inexperienced, they become the creative director, even though the photographer really should be the one with the vision and, putting everything together. The models get into a role where they feel like they have to run whatever's happening. And I've had a couple where I'm obviously not going, I don't work for you. I'm not going about it that
Yeah.
way. There's other ways to kind of mitigate and like change the direction of what's happening. But again, we're dealing with people. Everybody's different. You got to figure out how to manage who you're working with and not make them feel like you're managing,
Exactly. Yes.
essentially. Go ahead.
I mean, photography is a huge psychological
Oh, yeah.
aspect. I mean,
Mhm.
I didn't go to college for this, but I feel that if I would have, business classes, of course, would have been great.
Sure.
But psychology would have been so much benefit to help. And, and I'm not saying that you need to learn how to manipulate people, but you need to
Right.
learn how to
It's managing. It's
manage. Yes, exactly.
expectations, it's
Mhm.
emotions. Because you're just talking about the one model, she was uncomfortable when she came into it, so there was an insecurity there somewhere. And insecurity isn't always a bad thing. Insecurity is just like a lack of confidence. There's just a lack of comfort in what they're doing, whether they're new to it, whether they're uncomfortable with their body. I can't tell you how often I hear about bodies.
Mhm.
And how many models got into it because they had a horrible abusive relationship or because they didn't love their body after having children. There's so many reasons why everybody gets into it. And sometimes when you know the why behind it allows you to know how to work with the person.
Yep.
And that's where that psychology role kind of comes into it. Is I like to get to know who I'm working with just a little bit before I work with
Oh my
them,
God, yeah.
because it helps me understand what I can actually give them and how we can work together.
And that connection that you make between you and the model, and especially the more you work with a person, I have, there's photographers that come through, or I've seen, in events and things, and they're like, "Oh, hi, I'm so and so. I take your clothes off." That is just an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah.
Now, professional models are professional, and they
Sure.
do it. But let's talk through Messenger. Let's find your likes, your dislikes. What
Yeah.
are you into? What can we do? Oh, I saw you made a post that you liked Lord of the Rings.
Sure.
Oh, well, I have elf ears. Let's add those to the shoot. Now you are going to be more inclined to do more fun, cool things and be more into the shoot because you're into it. Where if you don't have a communication, then
there's a disconnect. Well, and I think some of that too is direction. Because one of the things when I go to the events and stuff is, and actually there was one event here where you had like piano and stuff set up, and there was a photographer that was really looking forward to seeing what he shot because he spent like an hour just shooting the same person in the same spot. And I was like, those have to be amazing. And then I was disappointed with the photos after, and I hate saying that because what does my opinion matter? But the amount of time that he spent, but never once did he give her any direction. Never once did he say a word to her on what he actually wanted from her. And then I realized after the fact that that's part of why I didn't like the photos. The other part was I didn't like the edit. Because I was watching her model and I'm not even going to call out names or anything, but she's actually a very good model. And that was why I was expecting the photos to be really, really good. And she was one of the ones I worked with that day. And that's where I think sometimes when we get into some of this stuff is my opinion is my opinion. And I don't always give it because I don't always know how it's going to be received. But if somebody actually asks me for feedback, I go, are you sure?
Yes.
Because I will be very candid with you because you asked me the question. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm still going to be gentle. I'll still be gentle, but I'm going to be honest. And in some situations, I don't have to make that because they're fucking amazing. They just needed a pep talk.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And I'm one of those people. I need a pep talk sometimes.
So I will admit, I'm in two different groups on Facebook. One where I am one of the top level photographers, and one where I'm one of the lower level photographers.
Okay.
And depending on how I feel is where I post photos.
Okay.
If I'm feeling like I need a little bit of a pep, then I post in the group that I know that everyone's going to be, oh my God, you're so great. If I'm feeling a little cocky, I put in the other group and they knock me right back down to earth. And they're not nice.
Yeah.
And it's harsh, but it's something that you need to hear from time to time.
That's fair because I know that the actual fashion industry is very harsh. There's no sugarcoating. Everybody just, and actually, a good example would be is American Idol, Simon Cowell. He is a great example of what that industry looks like. You're not holding back. You're saying exactly what you see, whether it's your opinion or the industry standard. it's coming out. You're going to hear it regardless of whether you want to hear it, regardless of whether they think it's going to hurt your feelings, because they have reached a point where sugarcoating doesn't work, and they know what society wants and what that standard is. And if you don't reach it, they're going to tell you about yourself. Now, in the hobby side of it, where you're still learning, deciding if you're going to be professional, deciding if it's going to be a hobby, deciding if you're an artistic photographer, whatever, it's a little different, because everybody's going to tell you your stuff is great, even if it's not amazing, because everybody wants to support you. And sometimes I'm bad about that, because I don't want to discourage anybody, because when you discourage people early on, they stop growing. When you can go, I might have done this a little differently here, and here's what I would have done. It's a great composition, but maybe you need to work on this portion of your edit a little bit more, maybe back off on this. But I don't give that feedback unless I'm asked for it.
Yes.
Because so often that's what happens in these groups. Somebody just runs at them and just telling them how awful an edit or something is. And I'm like, can we approach it a little bit differently?
Yeah.
Because now you've just shut this person down, as opposed to giving them an opportunity to grow.
Yes. Definitely you have to ask for critique. You can't give it just willy-nilly. And where I can come across as harsh on how I give things, I also I give a positive and a negative.
Yeah.
And a solution for that negative. And again, I preface all of it with, this is
My
my
opinion.
opinion.
Yep.
This is how I would do it, but it doesn't mean anything. I will tell you that I was helping teach a high school class, and I told the kids, I said, it's unfair that I come in and critique your work without you being able to critique mine.
Sure.
So I did the assignments just like them, did everything along. And in one of the classes, I said, there's a time when, you can screw a photo up pretty bad and you convert it to black and white.
Yeah.
Color, muddy color, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So one week I was doing the assignment. I thought, these would really be pretty in black and white. And I did it. And wouldn't you know, one of those little bastards was like, how bad did you screw up? I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, it's black and white, so you must have screwed it up. I'm like, yeah.
Like, does it always be?
Yeah, it doesn't mean that. But, I mean, at least you were listening.
Yeah. Well, we actually just talked about that when I got here. One of the last times Kazi and I were here, I did a set with color, and I'm not a lighting person. I hate lighting. I would much rather use natural light any day of the week. And we used colored lighting. And you said something to me during that shoot about, did I want white light? And I heard it, but I didn't register why you were asking me the question. And you had another set that you posted a week or so ago where you were using the gels, but you had a light, like the typical white light we would use. And then you had the color in the background. And I went, oh, now I get what he was asking me, because that white was on her skin, which meant that the color wasn't adjusting her skin color. So when I got to my photos of Kazi for the color, I was like, well, if I just convert this into black and white, I can play with the colors how I want to. Not that I couldn't in color. I still could have gotten rid of the purple hue that I had.
Yeah.
But as soon as I switched it to black and white, what was interesting is it went old Hollywood. Because her whole aesthetic of what she was wearing, we went from wild color club looking look to old Hollywood. And I was like, I can still run with it. It works. It's weird that it works, but it works. So that's definitely, it's a fair tip. There's been a couple of them where I've done them in color and I hated them in color, but as soon as I switched to black and white, I went, okay. And there's been times where I've shot with the idea of black and white, when I shot her in the, what's the thing? The shower thing.
The rain set?
Rain set. There you go. The original concept was old Hollywood perfume ad, black and white. And then when I looked at photos, I'm like, oh, I can't put these in black and white. The colors were just too right. So it's just, art is subjective. And it's subjective and objective in the sense of perspective. That was a lot of ifs. There was a lot of adjectives. All right. So bottom line, take a fucking escort with you. If they don't want you to take an escort, you don't work with them. I just, there's the line.
Go make money. Create art. Don't be creepy. Easy.
It's not that complicated.
Yes.
Well, we touched on the whole GWC thing to an extent. We didn't dive into it, which is probably a whole other conversation, but the ugly underbelly that I keep talking about is straddled because of nudity and spicy workers. There is nothing wrong with being a spicy worker, and I'm going to put that out there, and people can come at me all they want for it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. There are other countries that support it to the extent of healthcare. And our country's a lot more conservative, and you guys can come after me for that too. But because we're conservative, there are certain things that really shouldn't be that big of a deal that societally we make a big deal. And because of that is why some of the ugly happens, is because we have restricted so much in so many ways that the ugly becomes uglier. And it's the reason we have some of the issues that we do. And it's the reason the models run into a lot of the stuff that they do too. Not saying that photographers don't run into issues either, but it definitely seems to be heavier on the model
Oh,
side,
for sure.
target wise.
Yes.
And like even for me, like if I'm gonna work with somebody, I've gotten to a point where I really do it in group environments because then I don't have to worry about it
Mm.
because there's enough people around that my safety isn't as threatened, if you will.
Yeah.
And I hate the fact that we have to think that way, but we've created it.
And that's a big thing that Mom and I have a conversation with
I
a
love
lot
your
of
mom.
times.
I know I've said that before, but I love your
Everyone
mom.
loves. For those of you who don't know,
Mom.
Mama Triggs comes to the studio, hangs out,
Mhm.
talks shit, helps
Fair.
me when I need to, comes and sees her favorite photographers, and then just leaves. And she gets worried sometimes especially when I'm meeting a new model, and we're gonna be in the studio together for hours on end. That there's always the potential for them to say something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we talked earlier off camera about the vetting process.
Mm-hmm.
There is no such thing as a vetting process, because
It's tough.
what model A feels is offensive
Mm-hmm.
is the normal day for model B,
Yep.
but what model B finds offensive would appall model A. And how do you set that? And just
Well, that goes back to your spicy worker. The spicy workers have a tolerance. And so we were talking about the different categories. Somebody had posted on another post or commented on another post about traditional model versus content, OnlyFans versus influencer. Well, your OnlyFans model is completely different than your traditional model, and that would be A and B essentially.
yeah,
Even if your traditional model is doing nudity, because nudity does not have to be gratuitous. It doesn't. It has a tendency to be depending on who's shooting it, but artistic nudity is absolutely a thing if it's done right. And your spicy worker or your content person, their threshold and their level for what they're okay with is up here. The average person, it's down here. It's like way down here. And so when model B vets and they're like, oh, yeah, no, it was fine. Well, they're comfortable being naked. They're comfortable with people's body parts close to them, or solicitation for that matter, because I'm sure it happens way more often than it would happen for us. But model A may not be comfortable with that solicitation. But that's also where that line is blurred. I always call it the gray line that's blurred because you have the people over here who want to have that professional environment, regardless of whether nudity is involved. And then you have the predator over here who wants to take advantage of a situation and they get away with it maybe 20% of the time. Well, that 20% now becomes 30% of the amount of times that they're going to try. That's why the model groups exist. The
yeah,
model groups exist so that they can talk about it. There's a back and forth on the model groups in the sense of whether photographers should be in the model groups or not. Model groups have a tendency to let female photographers in. I am in none of the model groups. And part of the reason I've never joined a model group, not because I don't want to know the information, but it doesn't feel right to be part of the information because as a photographer versus model, if I were modeling as well, okay, fine. Toss me in the group. But I don't know what I could contribute, and I don't want to be put in a position where I say the wrong thing to someone. And I'm capable of saying the wrong thing. I put my foot in my mouth from time to time too. But that's meant to be their space that they can have that conversation without fear of whether it's judgment, fear of scrutiny, and they can let other people know they had that issue. But that's where vetting comes in too. If you're in the model group and you get to hear about the photographers, you make a choice. Not every model's experience with a photographer might be as big and ugly as the model felt like it was, and vice versa. Or it really was, and then there's enough that chime in that's like, okay, maybe we need to like back off on working with this person. It's a really odd position to be in because there's nobody to take it to.
No.
Most of the time, you're not going to the police because nothing really physically happened necessarily. So it's a discomfort or being offended or, whatever it is. Now, there are some times when, physical things do happen. But again, unless you're pressing charges, there's nobody to take it to.
No.
There's no agency. Maybe that's what I'm looking at. There's no agency that's going to handle it. So you either have to talk amongst yourselves or nobody's talking about it at all.
Yeah, we have to police our own industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And
Kind of like the buddy system, essentially.
Yeah, and I think in time that we can clean it up.
Yeah.
But it's going to have to be people talking about it.
Yeah, it's a collective effort. And I think the communication part is getting better. That I don't talk about it a lot, but I have an app that I really, really want to build, but I don't have the resources for it yet, whether that's financial or skill set. And I don't talk about it too much because I don't want anybody to steal it. Because it's a really good idea. There are safety measures and things that you can put in place maybe that's what we need to talk about too. What are some of the safety measures? We're going to do that separately. We'll put a post out on the group talking about what models usually recommend safety-wise. What are the things that they implement and put into place that they would share with somebody else, who's getting into modeling or doing something with the modeling. And we'll do a separate topic on that because I think that's worth just discussing in general.
I think so for
the
sure.
different options. So I think we're going to call it. I think we've said enough.
We've definitely got this one.
Not taking an escort is a red flag. Being told you can't have one is a red flag. Take somebody with you. I know there are a couple of models that will say they're taking somebody, but then they don't actually take somebody because they just want the reaction.
But also, if you do that, don't tell your photographer that you've done that.
Yes.
That a model did that with me. Said, hey, I'm bringing my husband. Great. Shows up. I said, hey, well, where's your husband? She's like, oh, he had to work. I just say that to see your reaction, which is fun. It's great. But don't tell me that.
Yeah.
That just kind of
that
kills
gives it
your
away.
whole...
Gives it away.
Yeah.
Because now they know you're going to show up regardless without somebody if they work with you again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for your time as usual. I don't know what's coming next after this, but we'll figure it the fuck out. Bye, guys.
See ya.